We're going to shift from weaponry to some civilian demonstrations you all would see during one of our special events here at the park. Our first will be a Civil War era laundry demonstration brought to you by Moores Creek volunteers Jim and Sally Buell. That will be followed by the cooking of an 18th century recipe in a modern 21st century kitchen with park volunteer Kayla Collins. Kayla comes back for another demonstration, the making of an 18th century toy using 21st century materials you all can find around your home. And we'll conclude with a demonstration of the process of cartridge rolling for muskets by our own Ranger Jason Howell. Take it away.
Hello, good afternoon. We're at Moores Creek National Battlefield, and today we're going to be talking about two aspects of Army life that would have taken place both during the Revolutionary War and the Civil War, and even continues to more modern times. During both wars, the quartermaster sergeant would have been available to issue the supplies to the troops that they would have needed. And a camp laundress was involved to take care of the laundry for the soldiers in both the Revolutionary War and the Civil War. And we're going to talk about that today. Here at Moores Creek, it's a little cloudy sky today, but it's a beautiful spot to be down in Patriots Field. Give you kind of more of a realistic look at what the natural setting would have been for both the Revolutionary War and the Civil War time frames to be in camp. And the camp laundress would have taken place during encampment times. The soldiers would have done it back in camp versus being on the march to get their laundry taken care of and be able to have fresh clothing at least periodically as they're on the move and taking battles, whatever they would be doing to do that. So the quartermaster sergeant was responsible to issuing all of the items to the soldiers with the exception of food, which was handled by the commissary sergeant, and any rifles and ammunition, which would be handled by the ordnance sergeant. So if you look and you see on my QM box, all the items would have come out from a depot like Washington, D.C. or some other area. And also with it being the Army, lots of paperwork to take care of to make sure everything was documented and accounted for. It's sometimes not so much in triplicate, but definitely having lots of papers to take care of. So the soldier would have gotten issued typical clothing, which would have been a pair of trousers, sack coat. Most of them had sack coats, which have been shorter than my frock coat here. Socks, they would have gotten socks. They would have gotten a white issue shirt from the United States Army. The different color shirts that you would see that I'm wearing today or on the laundry would have been sent from home, and they would have been very grateful to get additional shirts to be able to change into. They also got shoes. At the time they were called brogans, and at that time they did have a left and did have a right, unlike sometimes when you hear about in Revolutionary War time frames that they didn't really have a left or right shoe, but Civil War they did. Then other items they would have gotten would have been the cartridge box, the canteen, the haversack, which they would store their personal items in that they would have carried with them. We've got a ground cover or a poncho, could be used for both things, a blanket, and there'd be other various sundry items that they would have got issued by the quartermaster as well. During that time frame, a typical private was paid $13 a month. Paymasters usually caught up with the troops. They were hoping to catch up every 2 months, but usually turned into a 4-month time frame before the paymasters would catch up. But the $13 a month for a private, $14 a month for a corporal, and then sergeants could be paid upwards of $21 a month depending on where their rank, what they were taking care of, what their rank would be. Laundresses usually accompanied their husbands into the war, and as a couple, they would pool their resources together. So the laundress would be making anywhere from $7 to $12 a month, depending on the price of the clothing that was set to be washed, and that was set by the company officers. Each individual company would set their own prices, but between what the corporal or the sergeant, because usually it was a non-commissioned officer that would have brought his wife to then serve the job of a camp laundress, they could be making at that time frame a pretty good income, at least for themselves, on a monthly basis. With that, I turn over to my wife, who's accompanied me out onto the battlefield, and we'll start talking about what the camp laundress would do and how we should take care of the soldiers to keep them clean, their items clean, and hopefully reduce some of the bugs and whatever else we dealt with on a daily basis.
So the very first thing we would do is when they brought us the laundry, we would have to mend it. Because if there were any rips or tears, the laundry process would make it worse. So that was the very first thing we wound up doing. Then we would take all the clothes and turn them inside out and put them in a big kettle with boiling water and let them boil for at least 10 minutes. That would kill all the bugs and the ticks and lice. So, and those creatures like to go to natural fiber, so they burrow themselves into the cotton or the wool. So we needed to boil that out. Then we would take each individual item and try to treat the stains if there were any stains. So there were various ways to treat stains. There was lemon juice, there was alcohol, they actually used stale bread. There were different things to use to try to get stain out of items. The other thing is if you had a white shirt and you wanted to bleach it, they most commonly used ammonia. And then they would lay it out in the sun and it would sun bleach the items. The next thing you would do is you would wash the clothes. So this is lye and animal fat soap. And the laundresses had to make their own soap, and they would take the laundry and they would scrub them and let it soak in the soapy water. Then they would have other buckets and they would have to rinse it. They usually rinsed it 3 times. And some laundresses, if they had enough money, they had a wringer, an old-fashioned wringer. But most of them had to wring everything out by hand. Then they would put it up and put it up to dry. So these are the clothespins that they would use, and they would hang things up. Usually laundry took a couple days. So by the time they're doing all this, they have to wait for everything to dry. Once everything was dried, actually, oops, I'm making a mistake. I forgot to put the starch on. So this is potato starch, and they actually would sprinkle the wet clothes with potato starch because that gave a protective layer to the fabric, so it prevented the dirt from grinding in and the sweat from grinding in. So it protected the fabric. The other thing that we would use is horse hoof clippings. So when they clipped the hoofs of the horse, they would take those clippings, boil it down and make a paste, and they would put it usually on the collars and the cuffs, would make them stiff. It would protect the clothing, and then they would put the things out to dry. Once it was all dry, then they would iron them. So today is ironing day, and after everything is dried, we take it off the line and we start setting up the irons in the fire. It takes an hour and a half for 1 6-pound iron to heat up. Hence we would have 5 or 6 irons sitting on top of the fire. Hence the saying, many irons in a fire. This is a sleeve ironing board. We would iron all the clothes, all the shirts, and then fold them up neatly so they're all ready for the soldier to get. They would give us bandanas. After they were washed, we would put them in lavender and let them sit, and then the soldier would put that around their neck. The lavender wards off bugs, and so that would help them out in the field.
I'm a volunteer here at Moores Creek National Battlefield in Curry, North Carolina. I'm coming to you this morning from my kitchen, so grab your coffee and join me as we make a 18th century breakfast in a 21st century kitchen. Today we're going to be making a recipe called Perdu. Ingredients you're going to need are a few slices of stale bread, I have 4 eggs. I have about 1/4 cup of grape juice, or you could use wine. I have about a 1/2 tablespoon of nutmeg. I have some sugar. I have about 1/2 cup of heavy whipping cream. I have another 1/4 cup of grape juice, and then 1/2 stick of butter. We're going to use the other 1/2 in our pan. All right, we're going to start here today making our pan Perdu, which is an 18th century version of French toast. And so I have 4 eggs to start with, and I'm going to just beat those with a fork. Here in my jar, you could do this however you wanted. And then to this mixture, I'm going to add a couple of things. I'm going to add my 1/2 cup of heavy cream. I'm going to add about 1/2 to start with of the grape juice. And then I'm going to add my nutmeg. Nutmeg was the most common ingredient used in 18th century cooking, as far as the sweet spices that you would use today out of nutmeg and cinnamon. Give those a nice little stir. And then I'm also going to add a little bit of sugar. I'm going to start with about 1 tablespoon, maybe a little bit more, depending on how sweet you want your end result to be. For the rest of the pan Perdu, we're going to use 2 pans. I have here a cast iron skillet, and then I also have a medium-sized saucepan. We're going to make a sauce in the saucepan, and we're going to end up frying up our pan Perdu bread in the cast iron. So I'm going to start by making my sauce. I'm using 1/2 stick of butter, and I'm going to go ahead and melt that first. Next up in making our pan Perdu bread, I'm going to take our other stick of butter. I'm going to go ahead and melt that in my cast iron skillet. You want to make sure that the butter is all the way melted before you start frying up your bread so that it's at the right temperature. Now that the butter is melted in my cast iron skillet, I'm going to carefully take my egg bread and I'm going to place it in the middle of my skillet. And I'm going to let that sit until one side is completely brown, and then we'll flip it. Once your butter's melted, it's going to start to sizzle a pretty good clip, and so you're going to want to make sure to turn your stovetop down a little bit. I have my stovetop on setting number 2, and it's the second lowest setting on my stove. Now the sauce that we're making, as it starts to thicken up, it's going to become more like a syrup. Today we would use maple syrup on French toast in the United States. But colonial men and women would have made their own separate sauce that is almost like a caramel. I've had my bread sitting here for a few minutes now, and it's now ready to flip. So I'm just going to take it up with my spatula and give it a good flip. You'll notice that I have a nice caramelized golden brown, and that's what we're looking for. Now the other side will just take a couple of minutes to brown up, and then we'll finish off the rest of our bread and we'll be ready to eat. Now that our pan Perdu is done, we have a plate of food that looks a lot like French toast today. They wouldn't have topped it with things that we would today, like maple syrup or powdered sugar. So we're going to take our sauce that we made in our saucepan that's thickened up just a little bit and pour that over top. And I'm ready to eat. I hope you've enjoyed making this 18th century recipe with me. Join us again for the next one. Hi, I'm Kayla Collins, and I'm a volunteer here at Moores Creek National Battlefield. And today we're going to make an 18th century game called Bilbo Catcher. and we're going to make it using 21st century materials. So grab your kids and let's get to making. So Bilbo Catcher is an 18th century game that would have been played by children during the colonial time period. And this game would have been great because it was made out of tools that the children had on hand. Children worked hard, they worked in the fields and they worked at their homes, and so they didn't have a lot of time to play. And so games like these would have been played with what little spare time they had. Today for this demonstration, we're going to need one paper cup, one 2-foot piece of yarn, a sharp pencil, some painter's tape or masking tape would work fine, and a 1-foot by 2-foot piece of aluminum foil. We're going to start with our 2 feet piece of string or yarn. I'm going to start by tying a small knot here on the end. And because I know kids like to play rough sometimes, I'm going to actually tie a double knot here. And then I'm going to take my pencil and my paper cup, and near the top of the cup, I'm going to poke a hole. We're going to take our string and feed it through that hole so that the knot catches on the inside. The next step is to take the other end of our string that's attached to your cup, and you're going to place it towards the center of your aluminum foil. We're going to take our aluminum foil and we're going to wad it up into a tight ball. Next, we're going to use our pencil again, and this time we're going to poke a hole in the very bottom of our cup, and we're going to poke it through so that the pencil goes into the bottom of the cup. The last step is going to be to take our painter's tape and to secure our pencil by wrapping the painter's tape around the base. I'm going to use a couple of pieces. Then I'm going to do the same thing on the inside of the cup. Once your tape's secure, you're ready to play. The object of the game is to get your foil ball into the cup by just simply swinging it in. And there you go, you're ready to play, just like me, Bilbo Catcher.
Hi, I'm Ranger Howell. We're here at my house in my backyard at my picnic table. It's a nice clear sky. Today we are going to talk about making dummy cartridges for our dummy muskets. Now we're not going to give them bullets and black powder. We're going to use sand and marbles. Now, if you guys want to make these at home, it's really simple. First of all, you'd want to make yourself a template to create your cartridge paper. The 2 inches, 7 inches, 6 inches, 5.5 inches. You can either trace that out on a piece of paper and just make one cartridge, or if you wanted to, you could use a piece of cardboard to draw out a template for your cartridge and make several. So once you have your template, you will also need a former. All this is a 3/4 inch dowel rod. It has a little indention in the bottom of it for the marble to rest in. We'll also need some type of paper. Paper can be anything. You use regular sheets of notebook paper. You could use newspaper. Newspaper might be a little fragile. It's what we would use to actually make normal cartridges, but you might want to get something a little thicker, which we do use at the park to make dummy cartridges. You would also want to get you 2 bowls. It could be wooden bowls, plastic bowls. I wouldn't use glass. Glass could be problematic because you got a bunch of little kids. They're up here, you're trying to create something, they're going to get eager, may knock it over, break a bowl. So wooden, plastic bowls work really well. You would also want to have some black play sand, a scoop. Now we have a scoop that we use to actually load cartridges with. You could probably use a spoon or something small like that if you don't have a scoop at home. Type of string, we use jute twine at work, or you could use tobacco twine, just a thin twine or a string. Once we have everything cut out, we're ready to get started. We want to take our template here, just a piece of paper, and we want to lay it flat in front of us. Depending on whether you're right or left-handed or however you would like to do this, you want to take the former, the end with the little indention. Now, like I said, this is a dowel rod. It has a little indention on it. Now, you could just go get a 3/4 inch PVC pipe. That works well. Make a really short version. Probably don't need but about 7 or 8 inches. You're going to lay it on the template with the indention pointed towards the long end, like so. And you're going to give about 2 inches. You want to tie a knot. Then you're going to start to roll that, and you want to roll it up once over to basically where the paper touches one another. Then you actually want to press this down, the paper down on this end, so we could place our musket ball, our marble, here in the end. Once we got the marble in there, we're going to finish rolling this. Make sure we keep a good tight roll to it. I'm going to roll this up all the way. Then once we roll it, we're going to take and twist the end of this where the marble is, right? Twist that. Be careful as we're doing it, especially be using newspaper. At that point, it can tear. Then you want to take a piece of your twine, square knots. We want to go left over right and right over left. Once we have that, then we have the basis of our cartridge made. At this point, we're getting ready to put our black powder in, which is basically just black sand. You want to get a scoop of that, and depending on what you're using, you might have to do 1 or 2 scoops. With this here, I'm only have to put about 1 scoop in, pour it down. Now you can once you get all that in, you're going to have probably about halfway. That's about where you want it. You're going to lay it flat on the table. You're going to flatten out the end that doesn't have the sand in it. And then you're going to take one side, about about a third of that flat piece of paper. You're going to fold it over towards the middle. Then you're going to grab the other side. You're going to take a third of it, fold that towards the middle, like so. And you're going to get something that looks a little like this. And what you're going to want to do is going to take that flap, or take that little piece that you just made, that long straight piece of paper, and you're going to tuck it in right inside the edge of the paper going down the cartridge. And then you have your dummy cartridge. Now the kids can make several of these, carrying them around with them with their dummy muskets. They can go on campaign. So that's how you make a dummy cartridge. That's how we make them at the park. And with kids for our program. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope you guys are able to make a few at home.